It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, it's a bit unfortunate that we still don't know the fate of two of Joe Biden's most significant legislative initiatives as we tape this on Thursday morning. The first is the bipartisan $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which has already passed the Senate and is now before the House. The second is the larger Build Back Better $3.5 trillion spending bill, which needs both the House and the Senate to be approved. In the case of the infrastructure bill, it seems that there are enough progressive House Democrats that are willing to vote no without the passage of the $3.5 trillion package. And in the Senate, the $3.5 trillion plus plan now seems unlikely to pass without the support of Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, which will mean inevitable defeat if it is brought to a vote. In short, this is quite a mess for Joe Biden. And more importantly, is this a FUBAR moment for the United States if the Democratic-controlled Congress can't get these extremely popular bills passed?
Well, I think the first thing we all need to do, and this ought to start with the cable news broadcasters, is relax a little bit. I guarantee you that the United States will not end, and the Biden presidency will not end today, no matter what happens in Congress. It looks, first of all, like there is a bipartisan agreement to continue the government until December, and that is probably the time frame that will, in which we'll consider the infrastructure bills, this infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill. Things aren't going to end today. To me, these bills are important, but much more important for the president and actually for the Democratic members of Congress is to get COVID under control. And so the president's getting increasingly tough on mandates. He has to push booster shots. I assume within the next month, all of us will be able to get booster shots. And before the end of the year, we'll have vaccine for young kids. And hopefully by the beginning of next year, COVID will be under control and the country will be back to much more toward normal. And that's the key thing, both for making the country feel better and importantly, for getting the economy back on track. I'm going to take my Democratic role for a minute. We need to do two things with the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill. We need to achieve two objectives. The first is we need to do good for the country because while all the focus in the debate is on inputs and the size of the bill and what's in it and what program is here and what program is there, the American people judge it by whether it improves their lives, whether it helps the economy, and there is not always a straight line between the two. So our goal ought to be to do good and to also do good in a way that helps us hold on to the House and Senate. Because speaking as a Democrat, the worst thing I could imagine is Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. And that's an all too real possibility. And what that leads to is a compromise that was outlined pretty much by Donna Brazile, the former party chairman and Democratic activist, probably viewed much more progressive than I am, in a piece yesterday. And that is passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill and then passed a smaller but very significant reconciliation bill that everybody can agree to. I think that eventually will happen. It may not happen, quickly. It's possible the infrastructure bill will go down today, but that doesn't mean it's over. One of the most significant anti-recession bills I was involved with in an earlier recession in 1973-4 went down the first time because that was what we needed to do to get the votes to pass it the second time. And if you remember at the end of the George W. Bush administration, the first recovery bill after the 2008 crisis went down because that was what they needed to do to get the votes to pass it. So panic should not be the rule of the day. Now, I say it should be a smaller reconciliation bill. If Biden has made one strategic mistake, I think he's to let this reconciliation bill be too identified with progressives. Let's not forget that Biden ran against the progressives in the primaries and he beat them 2-1. Let's not forget in earlier Democratic primaries this year in Virginia for governor, in the 11th district of Ohio, and in New York City, the progressive candidates lost the more moderate candidates. The noise in the Democratic Party comes from the progressives, and they make it uncomfortable for you because they're always on Twitter, they're always on the cable news channels. But the rank and file voting power is with the moderates. I guarantee you, if people knew more about what was going on, Joe Manchin would be much more popular than Bernie Sanders for what he's proposed. So, and it's not insignificant, incidentally, that in the Democratic debate for governor in Virginia this week, Terry McAuliffe said this reconciliation package should be smaller. I think, and that's a Democrat with his job on the line. So I think we'll get that. I think that in their indications this morning and that I've heard that Manchin has actually been a lot more specific than a lot of the public utterings about what he needs. And I think a well-articulated in terms of purpose and elements reconciliation bill at a smaller cost that is less susceptible to the charge of inflation to go with the infrastructure bill. And then the final thing that I personally believe that Democrats need to do, and the one place they need to use their anti-filibuster muscle and carve out an exception is on voting rights. You do those three things to go with a $1.9 trillion rescue plan that's already been in place, the economy, and get COVID under control, the economy ought to be buzzing. And while history will still be against us next year, we'll be in the best possible position to defy that history.
Greg, do you agree with all that? I mean, frankly, it seems like this would be a perfect moment for the Republican Party, even independent of Donald Trump. Well, what's your take?
You know, there's a kind of a callous old saying around Washington that when you find your political opponents digging themselves into a deeper hole, you ought to just step back and let them keep digging. There's a little bit of that going on. Although in this case, I think Al makes a very good point. In this case, I think the people digging the hole are these progressives who are trying to tell elected officials that unless they agree to vote a certain way on one piece of legislation, reconciliation, that they're not going to get the chance to vote on the infrastructure bill. And I'm sorry, I just don't think that's the way the process works. And I do think that it's time for the Biden administration, and I suppose they suspect they probably are, to let these people that are making these demands stand to one side and go approach some Republicans who actually support the infrastructure bill. And so you're seeing bipartisan support on infrastructure, even though there's hesitation on this $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation package. I think you got to get the infrastructure bill passed, send a message to those recalcitrant Democrats in your own party out of the White House that you're not going to block the agenda that this president was elected on. And as Al rightfully says, having beaten the progressive candidates. So it's a real test of wills. It's not something new. I did I was amused slightly with one of our viewers' comments that Al and I live in the past. Number one, we read the comments. Number two, it's not that we live in the past, we just actually remember the past. And past presidents have faced this confrontation. Ronald Reagan could not pass his tax and spending reduction plans without Democrats. He worked very hard to bring Democrats over. George Herbert Walker Bush needed a compromise on a budget package. He worked with Democrats. In his case, the recalcitrant one was Newt Gingrich, who ran up to the Hill and started working against the initial deal. But in 1990, George Herbert Walker Bush signed a budget package that included some tax increases. And it led to an economy that my friend Al and President Clinton benefited by greatly during Clinton's administration. So Al is quite right. Putting these lines in the sand on telling everybody, especially the cable news commentators, that something's going to happen at a particular date and time is never a very smart idea. And the first thing that people are walking back from is the timeline. And it's now hour by hour. I suspect it's going to be day by day. A bill may go up and be defeated, and they'll come back and put the votes together. So it's a chaotic time in Washington. This was never going to be easy, but I do think that it would be a mistake not to hold accountable those who are really trying to cut a deal that ought not to be cut, which is holding one bill hostage, the infrastructure bill, for another, the budget reconciliation package. And I think it's really up to the White House and the Democratic leadership, and as Al says, the moderate Democrats to drive this home, and to do it, they're going to have to get some Republican votes, but I think they can get them.
But Craig, I mean, the president's popularity numbers are not doing very well. There's got to be a political consequence to this for him, or do you feel like he can rise above this and go back and get what he needs?
Well, so on that question, the reality is the focus is going to be on this legislative process in Washington. And while a lot of people don't understand or even want to pay attention to the details, what they pay attention to is, are things getting done in Washington? They thought with a Democratic president, Democratic leadership on the House and Senate, things would get done. And I think this process is probably going to further erode the popularity. However, here again, I do agree with Al. If you come out of this with an infrastructure package, billions of dollars, and a budget reconciliation package, trillions of dollars, which I do think he will come out with at some point, and you're dealing with the COVID vaccine successfully, you begin to have the makings of the kinds of things that will shift by the end of the year. And as he goes into his State of the Union message early next year, it'll shift public opinion back in his direction. Failure in these areas would be a problem, but I think it's too soon to proclaim that. I think a lot of the cable news network is political entertainment to drive people to their television screens. It is one of the, and I'm not a media basher, but it is one of the elements of this process that has been made much more difficult, with people seeking to go out and make news every hour on the hour, with commentators who have never lived through any of this before. It's a very high drama, but in reality, with this amount of money on the table, there's a huge ability by the White House and by Democratic leaders in Congress to put something together that gets the votes necessary for passage.
Al, you have the last word this week.
The last comment Craig made about the media is really right on target. I mean, you have all these young cable reporters who haven't been through it, who believe that negotiating positions are the last word. And that's not what a negotiating position is. It's the first word, and it can be done very sincerely and very harshly with the idea of the compromise that's going to come. Just a couple of quick points. I think Biden's numbers are down, but as I trace them, they really sort of reflect the public's view about COVID at the time. This pandemic is dominating the way people feel about their lives and their country and their politicians. So getting COVID under control is the most important thing. And Biden is, if, as Craig and I have suggested, he gets the bipartisan bill and a smaller reconciliation bill, look at what he's going to be able to take to the country. A $1.9 trillion rescue plan, which already is helping families. I mean, that may, in an ordinary administration, that might be enough. That children's tax credit is an incredible boon that most people, it's almost like Social Security, that parents can feel. And then you'll have all the construction sites that hopefully will begin to be built, and certainly the promise of jobs in that front, plus a lot of other important initiatives, including on climate and childcare and other things. That's a pretty impressive record. And assuming people are feeling good because they can now go out of their houses and they can go to their jobs and work in their offices and don't have to be stuck with their kids all day, that's a pretty powerful message, about as powerful as you can do.
Well, it certainly indicates that we have a couple of things to talk about next week. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thanks so much. We'll see you next time.